Hey, good morning. Good morning. What it do? Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. What a great time we are going to have today. Compelling conversation. Awesome introspect. That's what we do. Just trying to chill with you. COVID environment day number trillion. It is Tuesday, the 15th of December. Man, the year end is in our front windshield, and one heck of a year is behind us. My goodness, what a year this has been. We do hope that you all are just, safe. You're peaceful. There's a lot of stress out there, and we just, hope that everybody is safe and okay. Check in with us. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Tell a friend. Man, do you know how happy I am this morning? This is so great. I'm blessed. And that's what keeps me going. And I hope that you consider yourself blessed too. We're going to get to it in just a few minutes. In the meantime, here's the headlines, and you can review them a little later on at Beach City Radio, beachcityradio.com. This happened just a few minutes ago. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell congratulated Democrat Joe Biden as president-elect on Tuesday. He's saying the Electoral College has spoken. The Republican leader's statement delivered in the speech on the Senate floor ends weeks of silence over President Donald Trump's defeat. It came a day after electors met and officially affirmed Biden's election win. I want to congratulate President-elect Joe Biden, McConnell said. And as you know, the Electoral College decisively confirmed Joe Biden as the nation's next president, ratifying his November victory in an authoritative state-by-state repudiation of President Donald Trump's refusal to concede that he had lost. Those are the headlines. Let's get on with our life. Sit it on down there, President Trump. Get to stepping. And let's try to bring this country to some sense of normalcy prayerfully. Are y'all all right today? It's been such a heck of a year, We've had the elections, we've had the pandemic, we've had social justice demonstrations across the country on steroids. It's really been something. And I thought that today, I'd reach out and just have some reflections on the year from one who, in the past has been one of our stalwarts in the political and law enforcement areas. I really, really respect this man so deeply, and you'll probably hear some of the reasons why. I've rolled with him hard on quite a few major events across Southern California. And just a good guy, and, hey, I'm honored. You should be honored, too. He's here with us. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Ladies and gentlemen, former L.A. police chief, former L.A. city council person, the Honorable Bernard C. Parks. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm so happy to see you, man. It's great.
It's been a while.
Yes, it has. It has.
You've been in the trenches a long time.
Yes, sir. Yes. I've been out there a long time, and now I'm, I heard from your son a week or so ago, right?
Yeah.
And I answered the phone, and I promise you that you know how it is. I was having a conversation earlier that day about the Martin Luther King Festival in Leimert Park.
Mm-hmm.
And I said B2's name. I said his name, and literally that afternoon he called me just out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years, and he called me, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, we have go back so far, and then fast forward to today. Now you are here, and this is a
Yes.
really good thing. My face hurts. I was smiling so hard."
Yes.
Well, let me give the audience a little bit of a background here on our relationship. So, fam, if you guys know about the magnificent Martin Luther King Festival in Leimert Park, that was us, me and Chief Parks. If y'all know about the fantastic 4th of July Festival in Exposition Park, that was us. Mm-hmm. Me and Chief Parks. Let's see. I actually don't think my former employer would have been involved in the Taste of Soul. That was Chief Parks. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. And I often talk about Chief Parks, you guys, when we speak about the homelessness problems, because I was blessed to be around him, and he probably doesn't know, how, he's just, going about his business, but probably doesn't really realize how influential the things that he says. And I remember one time, Chief Parks, you and I can't remember exactly where we were, but we were having just a casual conversation, and you were talking about the homeless, and you said to me, she said, I'm looking around. He said, all I see is my people. And that hit me so hard when you mentioned that, and I have carried that. I often tell that story a lot, and from your view and in your opinion, let's start there about the homelessness issue. What, share with the people how that made you feel from your seat. And everybody, it's a buzzword now. Oh, we're going to end homelessness. What does government today need to do to end homelessness?
Greg, what you have to go back is 30 years ago and realize the word homelessness was invented to cover over the government closure of mental health hospitals. There was not a stomach to say we have people that are mentally ill on the street. And so when the hospitals were closed, and as always, when the state creates unfunded mandates, they always say there's going to be local funding to solve the problem that was at one time handled on a centralized basis. Well, that local funding never quite gets there. Mm-hmm. And so it falls on the counties and the cities to solve problems that are invented by the state's inaction. And so homelessness started at that time when the mental health hospitals closed. And unfortunately, we also have used the word homelessness to cover about 5 categories of people. It covers the mentally ill. It covers those who may choose to live on the street. It also covers those who are recently returned from state prison. It also covers a segment of people that are undereducated or uneducated. And the belief of people that come up with one standard solution that they can solve all those problems by giving someone shelter is a misnomer, because they're not treating the real issues that solve some of these people's problems. You need wraparound services, you need education, you need a lot of things. When I worked as a footbeat officer downtown Los Angeles in the 60s, the only people on the street were generally white males that were war veterans that basically came back, and they called them at that time winos, and they lived on Skid Row. Mm-hmm. Today, the population is completely different. You have families on the street. In years past, if you saw a woman living on the street, it was an oddity. Now it is not. It's a standard issue. To see a woman and a family living in a tent is today's homeless issues. in the past. You didn't see kids. And then you see the complete turnover to where the population on the street, no matter what city you go in, is almost primarily Black, whether it's in South LA, whether it's downtown Skid Row, whether it's Inglewood, whether it's on Wilshire Boulevard. Primarily the people on the street are minorities, generally African American. So the transition has changed. The problems have grown greater, but the solutions have not been broad enough to solve the problem. It seems like the political people are stuck on the word homeless and housing as being a connection, but they're forgetting all of the subcategories within the word homeless.
Wow, that's really incredible, and it's a multifaceted issue, I think, for any politician. I mean, it has become kind of a cliche when you listen to their speeches. Oh, we're going to end homelessness, and you have to ask them, how are you going to do that? It's going to be very difficult.
Any elected official that comes up with a bumper sticker slogan to solve a complex problem is misleading the public. Just like you find this HH proposition that was approved in LA County, and now they're finding, as always, when you're dealing with that amount of money, corruption seeps in, and some of these housing projects are costing $300,000 to $400,000 per unit, which is not what the original intent was. And then there's a big article recently where one developer has spent millions of dollars and hasn't created any housing. So these are the dilemmas you have when you, the government's involved in creating housing, but not really looking at ways in which the problem is going to be solved, even if they're successful.
Let me ask you, here's Desiree Edwards there, Watts Coffee House. How's Bobby?
Oh, Bobby's fine. Desiree, she's there.
She's out and she's watching right now. Yes.
Desiree, we love you, Desiree.
Yes, we do. Yeah, she's come on Coffee Conversations too. We did a thing for black restaurants.
That's another cornerstone of our community.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So now, Chief Parks, I often think of you too when you and I were sitting under the KJLH tent at the Jackson Limousine turkey giveaway, and you were sharing, your retirement or whatever, and you were saying, I'm just going to sit at the house and let drool run down my beard. And I remember, I'll never forget that. Have you really done that?
You know what? I have really enjoyed both of my retirements. The one thing I had expected to travel a little bit more, but the COVID has kept me inside because I have a pre-existing issue, which is old age. So I'm basically, like I said, I have a couple of little outings I go to, but we're very careful until some of this vaccine is distributed. But no, I've really enjoyed it. My son tries to include me in different things, and I keep reminding him that I'm retired. But I've enjoyed it. It's been a much slower pace, and it's great to be able to pick and choose what you'd like to be involved with.
All right. So now, as you've watched 2020 unfold, let's start with the obvious. So the whole cry against police violence out in the streets here. Mm-hmm. You are the police chief. What do you see? What's your thought?
I think the issue is that there are issues of police and community interaction in which several instances have occurred where officers have misused their powers. Police officers by law can take two of the most precious things people have, and that's their liberty or their life. And that's by law, they have that authority. Mm-hmm. But it's apparent that in some instances across the nation, we've had circumstances where it appears officers have overstepped their authority. Mm-hmm. The one thing I think that in looking at this and the efforts to bring this to a larger national attention, there's been a collection of names that have been presented, and people basically use those as an issue in which indicts police officers as a whole. And the thing that I think people don't realize is that many of these issues are occurring in different cities and different regions. They're not all one police department. And I've always said, in being a part of the police department, sometimes the police and the community are talking past each other. The community looks at incidents of violence by officers or use of force as a collectiveness. They don't really care what color the uniform is. They don't care where the city is. They say police have done this. Police departments look at things as individuals, saying that's not this department, or this is a isolated incident. And those kinds of conversations often don't mesh into anything productive. And so I think the graphicness of the Minnesota incident, where people visualize the actions of the police that appear to be totally unnecessary and took a life, those are the kind of visuals that stick in people's heads. Just like when people saw Rodney King, the visuals are what drives their concerns. And then what you have is ability of, when they look at it collectively, they look at it and say, well, we finally have identified or seen this activity. It validates what our concerns are. And this is what happens all the time, and yet we can't prove it. And so the visuals are now being used as an example of this being a scourge throughout the country, and that every contact becomes suspect. Every use of force becomes something in which people believe is not appropriate. So I think at some point we're going to have to come to the middle and realize that some instances officers do use force appropriately. There's some instances in which officers may need training. There's some instances officers need to be terminated because they didn't use. There's some instances which they should be filed on. But all dealing with them all in one ball as though they're all the same, I think defeats the whole purpose of the discussion.
There's Coach Ward. He's saying he's been rushed to the ER, tested positive COVID-19, but this conversation has made him feel better in this tough times. I love always Coach Ward. That's our other partner in crime.
That's right.
There. Yes.
That's right.
Yes. Man,
we bringing back all the people.
Yeah, it's been blessed that a lot of the people from the community, go ahead and follow Coffee Conversations with Greg J and beachcityradio.com. I left the radio station there, Chief, and kind of semi-retired, I guess, but started my own media company. I moved out to Long Beach. I'm a couple blocks from the water.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that you have enough experience to start your own. And, the one thing, even though, all these activities, you mentioned Coach Ward and all of them, we also remember all that effort of doing the fireworks that we had every year as part of the Exposition Park. And then we later moved it over to Van Ness. But these are things that when I'm over at Mama's Chicken getting my tacos,
yes, sir.
Come in there all the time and want to know, when are you going to do the fireworks show? And I said, I'm 3 or 4 years removed from the fireworks show. I said, that's something you need to go talk to your current councilman about.
Yes.
Because we did the best we could while we were there.
Yeah, we had the bomb, and you know what? And it continued on after you left, and I guess they didn't have it for COVID, but the year after I left, it's still out there. They're still doing their thing, but that's our legacy right there.
Yeah, but I enjoyed every day of it. It's something that our staff really enjoyed and did a great job putting on events. And, even with the Taste of Soul, I mean, that started off at just a meeting with Danny Bakewell and what do you think? And next thing you know, it's a little seed, and next thing you know, it's grown. And I think the last one I think they had like 250,000 people over on that day. And the only complaint I've ever heard people complain about is, why don't we have it 3 or 4 days in a row? And you say,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
I don't know if logistically you could afford it, but that's something to look for in the future.
Yes, and I'm really happy to have been a part of it, to produce it, and I show pictures of it in some of my marketing materials to let them know,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is what we could do, and when
Mm-hmm.
people see the pictures of like you say, more than a quarter billion people, they're like, holy crap, look at
That's
that!
right.
It's
That's right.
something, and
Well, and
no.
the thing that also is interesting is that many people were fearful that you couldn't have an event like that on Crenshaw, as though it was an area that was going to be guaranteed there'd be some problem. And I don't think they've ever had one problem in all the years they've had it there.
No, and there was I remember sharing with the group, the same weekend was a event. I can't remember where it was, back east somewhere. It's called the Pumpkin Festival, but it was
Mm-hmm.
a rock event. But those kids tore up the whole street,
Yeah.
and I was like, hey, look, let's compare,
Yeah. Well,
So
the
it
thing is,
really.
we do know that the families come out early and,
Mm.
and enjoy it. When it gets dark, you got a completely different deal there. So that's why it was
Mm.
always important to have a starting and ending time to give people a sense that there was going to be secure for them and their families.
Mm. Now, we're talking about our festivals that we did together and everything, and I just want to give you props publicly because now we look at us, we're retired, and I'm gonna say this because we can. So,
Yeah.
I give you props because people don't know that behind the scenes, people came for you behind that 4th of July event. It's just
Yeah.
like, really. And I remember I talk about this often because it was so surreal when we were down at the Coliseum Commission,
Mm-hmm.
and the people were giving you a hard time, and then we took a recess, and so I was in the restroom, and one of our current big time politicians just won an election down there in the Crenshaw area. He came into the restroom too, and we ended up having a meeting in the men's room about how they were giving you a hard time up there on the dais. And I was like, Your Honor, if it was all of that, we wouldn't be hustling around here for porta potties and all that whole thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
you guys need to leave this one alone and let the people have fun on 4th of July. And
Yeah.
he looked at me, and I just like, it's just not what you guys are saying,
Yeah.
And so the event lived, and there it is. But I just give you props, and I just thank you so much for taking the lumps for the people, and you do it so cool. Look, Chief Parks is a coolest cat in LA.
Now, the thing is, when I think what you find is if you have a plan and what keeping your eye on the prize and it serves the community, then you generally are going to come out okay. Unfortunately, you have people that see something successful and they'll look up and want to either take it over or redirect it because they aren't doing the same thing in their community, and they don't. That basically, and many times they're trying to alter or change what's happening in other communities. So the thing is, you just keep an eye on serving the public, and in most instances, it comes out fine.
That's right. That's right, man. That's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Okay, so now, Chief Parks, I got to ask you. I love, uh, you know, police dramas on TV. It's one of my favorite genres.
Mhm.
At this stage in life, what's the case that you are the most proud of?
Well,
Like.
we've had several. The one thing, if you go back and look at them, I think the most recent one I was involved with was the Grim Sleeper, 20 years of homicides through the city, of serial murderer, and Lonnie Franklin. I was involved in that in the police department, and later, as a council member, we proposed the largest reward in the city's history, and that case came to a conclusion. Also, we've had a variety of things in the sense of dealing with uh, terrorist cases when I was in the chief's office, where we had the people that had been hiding for 15 to 20 years. We found the young lady in Minnesota running her separate life after she tried to bomb some police cars in Los Angeles. And then we had the Rampart case that basically we found some corrupt police officers in Rampart and brought that to a conclusion. But there's been several things, after 38 years on the police department, and working throughout the city, there's a lot of issues you've had a chance to deal with, and sometimes been long enough to deal with them 2 or 3 times.
Man, so if I may say this publicly and forgive my French, he's such a badass. It's just he's just real good talk, real stuff. All right, so now you look at we just came out of this election time, and you see, especially particularly in the Crenshaw area, you have new elections, shuffling of the politicians in our community. What do you think? Are we still moving forward in the right direction, or what's your assessment? And then also to comment on, I know you had something to say about the hot and heavy DA race.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm concerned about is that, and I think it was a major mistake when the public was convinced to go with term limits, and they thought it was going to bring all these fresh-faced new elected officials that were going to come with new ideas and then move on after so many years and go back to their private life. And in effect, it's turned around to where we have musical chairs. We have somebody that goes from council to state to council, council to supervisor, supervisor to Congress. I mean, so you're just recycling the same people, and many of them really, when you look at their backgrounds, they've not really been successful in the jobs they held, and now they're going on to other jobs. And some are coming back as retreads, coming back to a job they held years ago. So I just don't know if that served the public to have term limits. Term limits should really be, you go out and vote, either vote people in or vote them out. But to have an arbitrary figure saying that you must move on, and then find that people are just moving from one, it's like musical chairs, from one chair to the next. I took a very active role in the DA's race, because I was concerned that, and this is my bias, having worked through an organization for 30 some years and then having a chance to lead it, many people don't understand the significance of being able to basically work your way through these systems. And most of my career, our goal was seeing how you might attract and then promote and develop minority and females through these organizations where they've never had the opportunity. And yet when we see many of them come to their goal of becoming chiefs of police or DAs, you actually have organizations that come out and protest them, again, on a slogan without any real definition of what they can or can't do. And when you look at this whole issue across the nation, the one casualty that I've seen is we've lost about a dozen minority chiefs of police or high-ranking officials who have been either asked to resign or chose to resign. And you think about all that work over the last 30 years to get a visible minority in these positions. And they've been basically, in many instances, they've adopted the Black Lives Matter years ago, not under that label, but they've been the ones in departments that have made decisions and taken action to ensure that there's fairness within the department and outside of the department. So I saw those kind of casualties are somewhat bothersome to me. And I think that Jackie Lacey was given a very raw deal, particularly on a candidate that, if you follow his career, has, basically did not have a positive outcome in Mesa as the chief of police, did not have a positive outcome in San Francisco as a chief of police, And if you read the paperwork and listen to the mayor of San Francisco, have a horrendous impact on San Francisco and the life and quality of life, and yet gets elected in Los Angeles and immediately starts addressing issues that appear are going to have some negative impact on victims, because many of the things that he and others in this quote progressive movement are talking about, issues dealing with defendants and suspects, as opposed to how do you deal with the victims of crimes. And when you make a blanket statement, I'm just not going to file on certain quote low-level crimes, then what do you tell the victim that's the victim of that low-level crime, and how do you solve it? And if you leave it unsolved, who's going to resolve the conflict in the community? And if the police can't arrest people and stop the problem, and the DA doesn't file, then how do you solve it? And does it just another kind of issue fall on the city streets to resolve itself, much like the homelessness and other issues? So I just thought that people made a bad judgment in moving away from Jackie Lacey, who was a tremendous prosecutor, and replaced her with a person who's never, ever tried a case in a criminal court.
Wow, that's really something. I did see the letter from London Breed, the mayor of San Francisco, and that was wow, that was pretty telling.
Yeah, well, it was very telling when the whole political structure endorsed a candidate from LA County, when the guy that was running against her had worked for 8 years or whatever in that region of that county. And in fact, a neighbor of mine, they're like several months late, but they just read some of the articles from San Francisco about the condition of the city. And now they're having buyer's remorse and voting against Jackie Lacey. And I'm saying, well, that's the research you should have done before you went in the booth.
Wow. And that's something. Well, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, but we also had this similar situation with the sheriff, where all of a sudden you had a sheriff that was doing a good job, and he gets voted out on what a progressive, again, the progressive agenda of change. And now 2 years later, you have the Board of Supervisors trying to figure out how they can impeach him. And so, the thing is that you got to really be careful on buying into slogans without definition, and again, are simplistic answers for complex problems.
All right, let me just go there with you. So here's the slogan they're saying right now, and a lot of us are wrestling with it. If we would be honest with ourselves, we try to wrestle with it. Okay, so they're saying defund the police. What do you say there?
Well, I think the issue is that, again, if you don't have a definition or give clarity, then everybody creates their own definition. And again, as you see the backlash in communities, even where they almost started this in Minneapolis, now even the mayor is opposed to, quote, defunding the police. I don't know what it means when people say, let's reimagine the police. Again, another slogan with no real definition. I think that the last thing you want to do in this, and having run the budget committee in the city for a number of years, the last thing you want to do is tie down our earmark money when you're trying to deal with larger issues. It's one thing to say, here are 8 or 9 things I want the city to consider funding, but to then nail it down and say it has to come from the police budget of that elected body. It's one thing to look at these 8 or 9 things that people may want, and if it's within their jurisdiction, to talk about funding more housing or more services for the mentally ill, whatever they think needs to be funded should be put in the pot and looked at in the sense of saying what funds we have and how we can fund all of our needs. But to say, I only want you to take the money out of the police department, I think is a disservice to the police department and the safety element of the larger city, because you may find funds in other part of the city budget that is more appropriately cut as opposed to the police department.
Yeah, I'm a torn on this because I clearly, for me, as Joe Citizen here, some kind of change needs to happen. And I'm not a police officer, so I don't know what that change is, but something needs to give here because
Yeah.
folks are dying out here. But at the same time, when you say to me, defund the police and all of that, and I look, if I were going to keep it real, I look out on these here streets, you need the police,
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that this is the time, and I think it's kind of interesting. People kind of forget, and maybe not been around at the time, that the late 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, when this city was annually dealing with 1,000 to 1,200 homicides a year. And all of a sudden, progressively over time, they've reduced down to around 300. Well, that's a major change in the safety on the street. And I think people forget what it used to be and how it's resolved and reduced itself by investing in the police department. The fact that an officer may do something inappropriate shouldn't be something that you say, I want to get rid of the police department. I think you may want to get rid of that officer if it warrants it. And again, it may be the investment in training. And again, right in the middle, 2020, crime is going up more rapidly this year than it has in the last decade. So is this the time to start reducing police resources when crime is going up? And we can never forget about the victimization. I think that's where I get concerned. So many of the discussions are made about doing things that ignore how do you serve the victims of crime. And I think when we talk about the issues, when people say, well, police officers shouldn't handle the mentally ill, and you say, well, that's a great thought, except who will? And the only reason the police are involved is that there's no other agency that is out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when there's disturbance of calls, who do people call? They call 911 and ask the police to resolve it. So the police are dealing with a lot of issues that aren't necessarily something they want to deal with, but they're thrust into it because it is a lingering problem that escalates and then may cause even more detriment in the community.
Yeah, and the times are hard now. People are desperate, and yes, crime is going up.
That's right.
I'm seeing stuff on the various platforms on Facebook and other social media where citizens are, giving warnings that, hey, this kind of crime is happening here. Watch out for
That's right.
this and that. You're starting to see a lot. Yeah.
Well, it goes all the way from, you can see just in the area I live in, the number, and it's not necessarily violent crime, but just the number of people's packages are stolen off their front porch. People are staying home, they're ordering things so that they don't have to get out into the shopping issue, but yet they can't, within 5 minutes of it hitting their porch, if they don't go out and get it, somebody else is taking it. So, and then with the new issues in the state of California, anything that's under $950 can't be prosecuted as a felony. It has to be a misdemeanor, whether it's a car, a gun, no matter what's stolen. That dollar value dictates what you're going to do with it. And then the city attorney says, well, because there's no room in the jail and the courts are not going to give any great amount of time, many of those misdemeanors don't get filed. And so, again, that's a problem that occurs, that we're not creating solutions for the public, but we're just adding more burden to them by not resolving their problems.
Now, I know you're the chief of police in Los Angeles, and I've moved out here to Long Beach, which is an incredibly progressive, and people are very, engaged with city government. I mean, when they have their city council meetings and it's broadcast on the government TV channel, it's a thing. If they take ratings, I'm sure that on Tuesday nights, that would be the highest rated show. Now, how much do you keep up with the area of Long Beach, and how do agencies, I'm sure they talk to one another. They would have to, I would think. How much do you know? And then how much do you know about maybe some of the challenges that they might be having here in the beautiful city of Long Beach?
You know what? I don't keep up with it daily. I'll see in the newspaper or reading some of the electronic news things that may occur there. But again, I primarily look at things that within LA County and some of the state and then the national, and with the elections, you're bombarded with the national news, with whether it's COVID or the most recent election. And even though it's a month and a half late, even the Senate Majority Leader decided that there's going to be a new president. I mean, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, that you have people who are so frightened of a guy that's leaving office that they can't even acknowledge the new president coming in. And I think it does put a real spotlight on Georgia, because I think if these two Senate elections are not favorable to the Democrats, you're going to have 4 years of non-action, because you have a commitment from McConnell that he's not going to work with the Democrats, and he'll do the same thing he did to Obama for 8 years. I'll make sure none of your programs go through. Well, at some point, the general population has to realize that if you want things done, there's got to be a cooperative effort. But if you're going to sit there and roadblock for 4 years or 8 years, is that person somebody that should be in that position?
Wow, that's pretty incredible. Now, what's your favorite international perspective?
I watched some of that. I think the issue that I think, to me, that's kind of important is that you realize that although we as a country are going through a variety of things, and some of it's brand new, when you look at the international news, you find out that everybody's going through almost the same thing. They're going through COVID, they're going through elections, they're going through the lack of cooperation, they're going through these issues of non-cooperation amongst the different parties, unable to construct their governments in the sense of what's going on. And then there's also a issue worldwide on this whole area of corruption. I mean, when you look at the corruption that's going on in states, in the United States, in the federal government, and then you see what the corruption that's going on in other countries, it's just everybody's addressing the same issues. And I think unless we can get a handle on this whole issue of corruption, you're going to find that there's going to be less and less people willing to take an active role in their local government, because they think, why should I? Because people are just self-dealing and self-serving. And I think we see corruption investigations in the LA City Council. We see them at the state level. We see them at the federal level. Every day there's a report about, someone is self-dealing as it relates to, recently having hearings in the federal government and immediately going out and selling millions of dollars of your stock and making a profit. So these are things that people lose real respect for the process and the government when there's a belief that there's self-dealing and self-interest above public interest.
That's a powerful perspective, because I've been talking to a lot of people about the corruption that's been happening in the LA City Council. And somebody said it's almost like FBI headquarters. Somebody was joking with me. It's like, when I go to work, it's like FBI all over the place.
Well, the last thing you'd expect in city government is, or any government, is all of a sudden you have search warrants being served on a variety of offices. And if you are tainted by that, how can anyone believe when you stand up and say, I'm, the safeguard of the community, safeguard of serving my constituents, and you find that people are really not. They're self-dealing, they're looking at ways, and there's so many ways that people can, whether it's directly accepting a bribe, or whether they are accepting a favor, or whether they're accepting a hotel room. There's so many ways people can be corrupted. And it's one of those things that if you fall prey to it, eventually it's going to catch up with you. But that's why there's so many people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really something. So then how do we restore the trust of the people? We see all this stuff going on. Well, I mean, I think this election season, the public, we began to ask ourselves a lot of different, self-searching questions. And then even on the we talk about the presidential level, the president refusing to concede. But what concerns me more is that there's 70 million people who think like him and who harbor these horrible thoughts. On the local level, we're hoping to we're hoping that we're hoping that things will be better. We know that the local elections are so important. But man, sometimes they just, damage our trust. How do we win the public trust back?
Well, it's and often impossible to regain. And that's why it's so precious not to be put in a position to where your credibility is questioned. And I think so much of it is these conspiracies, and this social media has just gone completely off the map. These things were started off to be a way in which people communicate with each other and tell each other about what they're doing. It's now become a major business to misrepresent and misinform. And I think it's going to take years and years for people to work themselves through these issues and begin to believe. I mean, when you get, 40, 50% of the people saying, I'm not going to take the vaccine, and you're saying, why? Well, because I don't think it's true. Or you still, what is that? We had this conspiracy theorist that wanted to promote the idea that these school shootings were fake. And this just goes on and on. Or whether Hillary Clinton was running the child pornography business out of a pizza place in New York. And a guy shows up with a gun. Saying he wants to end this. So you begin to realize how gullible people are, and there are people that will take advantage of it. The other day, they had one of the U.S. senators that actually said he enjoys putting out misinformation. So I don't know where that group of people came from, but when you get 17 attorneys general and a bunch of states going to the Supreme Court, making up a story about a fake election, and have to be told by the Supreme Court, no, this isn't true. And then they begin to look at another way to figure out how to bring the same issue to another court. And you say, it's been over since November the 3rd, but there are people still looking for ways in which they want to disenfranchise 20 million votes because they want another person to be president. And you start realizing this just didn't start. This whole conspiracies, this misinformation. When you have a president that felt comfortable misleading or lying 25,000 times over a 4-year period, that gives you an idea of how high level it is that dishonesty is rewarded.
That's wow, interesting. But Chief Parks, I've spent a little time on the early morning radio show over there at KJLH, and I remember hearing some of the conspiracy theorists from across the country and just going, "Oh, you know what? That's a bunch of bull crap." Yeah. But at the same time, what I'm learning now is I'm seeing stuff that they would talk about that we would dismiss as conspiracy theories. I'm watching them come true now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it's one of those things. No one has all the time to research every issue, but there are some things that basically are so way out that you just, on its face, you wonder how anyone could be convinced. We still have people debating whether the world is flat or round, and you're going, I think we resolved that a long time ago. Or did people really go to the moon, or did they do that in a a theater a lot. And so these are things that people keep promoting and are, like I said, it's the one that's most bizarre is how do you decide, how do people fabricate a child shooting where people lost their school age kindergarten kids and people are promoting that this didn't happen. You know, I mean, these are things that, you know, that are beyond the pale. And yet there are folks that are still running with these ideas. And then, so it's not much more to then latch on to these other conspiracies about the elections. You know, when a candidate stands up and says, the only way I can lose is the elections are rigged, even though they haven't counted the votes, he's already put in people's minds that what outcome he wants. And then if you get 70 million people that vote for him, and then a large percentage of them now believe they were rigged, although there's no evidence, that begins to, again, reflect that there's no real thought other than you're pledging allegiance to a person or a theme as opposed to you using your own common sense.
You know, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. It looks like in our community, and you got some great perspectives out there. I mean, you know, this is really powerful. Now, you know, as we look, I mean, you're a man who loves his community, and that one I could just say unequivocally because I know what I'm speaking about, what I know, not what I heard.
Yeah.
And so, when we look forward and we begin to, as we come out of the holidays, go into 2021, we're going to begin to think and meditate on, you know, the dream of Dr. King and the beloved community. What is your hope now? You know, you've got all these years of experience, this very deeper than most perspective on our community. What is your hope and your prayer for the beloved community going forward?
Well, what I would hope is that we as a community not just wait until there is a tragedy or an issue to come out and express our views, but that we take an active role daily in making our community better. I was always amazed as the chair of the budget committee. We used to have what we call budget on the road, where we would go out and have budget meetings out in the community. And the most important committee in city government talking about how do you disperse $7 to $8 billion. And yet you couldn't get a dozen people to come in and say what they thought the priority should be. And so the activism beyond just if there is a bad issue that I'm going to show up and I'm going to express my views about the bad issue. How about expressing your views on a daily basis? One of the things I remember, and it was most graphic, was when you may recall several years ago, Crenshaw High School they threatened that they were going to lose their accreditation.
Yes, I remember.
Okay, and that meeting about accreditation, they filled up the gymnasium, and people came there with very loud voices and expressing their concern about their kids and all the things that they were upset about, and went on for hours. A week or two later, the school district came back with the certification had been put back in place. The next meeting of the parent group, they had 12 people in the library, and so you can't just react to when there is a tragedy. Sometimes your actions might prevent a tragedy if you stay in tune with what's going on and your participation is on issues that are relevant daily. You might find that you may cut out those tragedies over time.
You know, that's what we always talk about here. Participation. You got to participate. You know, we can sit on it's easy to sit on the sideline and scream and holler, but we've got to participate.
Well, you got to participate. And again, it's something on the ongoing participation. Again, it seems like what drives people out is when they think it's a catastrophe. I mean, it was horrible what we saw on the Floyd incident in Minneapolis. But on the other hand, how many meetings have that city had about issues that may be below that level, but yet no participation? I was always amazed when we had the incident in or near St. Louis where they had the young man that was killed, and to find out the city of Ferguson was 70+% minority, yet had no minority representation on the elected level. You say, well, how does that happen? How do you have every member of city government, mostly male white, every elected official is a non-minority, yet the city is 70% Black? And I think it was just recently a minority female became a city councilman. And you say, well, that's something that's just mind-boggling, that you could have a 70% majority of a city and have no minority representation.
Got to get out there and vote.
Yeah.
Got to participate. You
And
can boil that on down to even the music industry. We talk about the Grammy Awards and how some of the awards are just, but if you don't vote, you get what you get.
That's right. Well, the thing is, I tell people all the time when they come up and they'll say, they found racism here, or they found this, that, and you say, well, you realize that when the people put the Constitution of the United States together, they actually pretty much left women out and only listed Blacks or Africans at what, 3/5 of a person. So if the country was built on those themes, why do we think they're just going to disappear on their own?
Wow. Hey, Chief Parks, would you look at the LAPD now, and you're reading your newspaper? I'm sure you got friends and contacts and everything. Can you hear stories and situations? Are there moments where you just say, boy, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that stuff?
Well, you know what? There are times when you look at that, things have changed dramatically, and I think when I was there as a chief, we used to always say, you had 21 bosses, 15 council members, and five commissioners, and the mayor. But the amount of things that are going on now that are, whether it's demonstrations, whether it's things that spontaneously break out that without any notification, those are things that are completely different. Also, I was just reviewing a video the other day where a guy just kind of broke into Harbor Station and assaulted the desk officer, took his gun and pistol whipped him right in the in the lobby of the station. So there are things that are going on that are completely different. And yes, I am glad to be home.
Yes. Wow. Now, how does that happen?
Well, the thing is that the officer, when you're in this business, you can never let your guard down. You can never forget the tactics they taught you. And they because of COVID, they had basically put an order out and had citywide that the doors of the station, they weren't accepting visitors from the public inside the station because of the disease. And someone left the door unlocked, and a guy drives up, storms the door, sees an officer in the lobby as opposed to behind the desk, attacks him, knocks him down, grabs his gun, pistol whips him, takes the gun, runs out of the building, and on his way out the door turns and shoots several times into the station. And these are things that the officer was injured a little with being pistol whipped, but could have been very tragic, because as the officers were running out into the lobby to find out what was going on, this guy is shooting through the windows back at them. And so it's just fortunate no one was more seriously injured or killed. They caught the guy later after a pursuit. But these are the kinds of things that are unique to today and didn't occur years ago. I've watched TV on some of these demonstrations, whether they're dealing with Black Lives Matter or they're dealing with institutional racism. And yet people are coming to demonstrations with sledgehammers on their backpack. And you say,
Wow.
well, that's not something clearly to just express your view. That's coming there to commit damage. And then you see the amount of carnage that's been in cities. They burned down a police station in Minneapolis. Seattle allowed a group of people to create an amnesty zone, where don't come in here, police can't come in here. And it was endorsed by the elected officials. And so there are things going on today that just are unheard of when I was in the police department.
So if I'm that officer sitting at the desk in Harbor Division, I'm catching it from my coworkers, aren't I?
Well, the thing is this: when you look at it, you really get a sense that he was ill prepared for what he was confronted with, and that's unfortunate because it could have cost him his life.
All right. Well, listen, this is Jeffrey Copford Sr. He's saying, love you, Pops. God knows we miss you and Bobby.
Yeah,
and he says you would be glad to know that Jeffrey Copford Jr. is now a LAPD officer.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes. And you remember Lon McHugh over at KTLH? I think his son is also LAPD. And last I heard, he was out there at the 77th Street.
Yeah, well, that is a great career. Career. I'm glad to hear. Jeffrey's dad, mainstay in the community with the number of kids he helped with the choir and all those other things. But I'm glad to hear his son has become a police officer.
All right. There's Rhonda Love. She says, thank you, Honorable Bernard C. Parks, for all that you've done for the beloved community. You've touched our lives more than you'll ever know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, Chief Parks, listen, boy, you are absolutely one of my favorite folks ever. And I do say that a lot of my successes and major events that I've been able to be blessed to be a part of, an essential part of, to be honest with you, that's because of you. And
well, thank you very much.
We brainstormed, we made some stuff happen in this town.
That's right. And I was very fortunate to have a staff that really enjoyed working within and working for the community, and they would jump on these events and just put their heart and soul into them.
Now, do you talk to Christine and all them?
Talk to Christine. In fact, I talked to Christine just recently. Unfortunately, her mom just passed away from COVID, and in fact, they're having the graveside services today.
Okay. All right. Well, my condolences go to her. And again, Chief Parks, thank you so much for taking this time to sip coffee with us. This is Coffee Conversations with Greg J., the Honorable Bernard C. Parks. You can check the replay on beachcityradio.com, of course, on Facebook, YouTube. You know how we do it. Got a show tomorrow, y'all. Got a show tomorrow with Miss Sandra Jacobs. Sandra Jacobs or Sharon there, super producer? We don't know her name, but here, Sandra Jacobs, and she's coming from Leadership Long Beach, and she's going to be talking about courageous conversations. And then on Thursday, we're talking, and you remember this group, Sounds of Blackness from Minneapolis, Minnesota. They're going to be checking in with us with a big announcement. And so we're just so glad to be here. Check us out, beachcityradio.com, Coffee Conversations with Greg J. And always remember, love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings.